In 1971, music producer Phil Spector surprised his wife Ronnie with 5-year-old twins for Christmas. At first, she thought it was a blessing, until she realised the deranged reason he did it. Phil Spector was one of the most important music producers in history. He made legendary songs about love while being incapable of feeling it himself. He got away with terrorizing people, including stars, for decades, until one night he went too far. In 1939, Harvey Philip Spector was born into a New York City family destined for tragedy. He was only 10 years old when his dad, consumed by debt, took his own life. His gravestone reads, "Ben Spector, father, husband. To know him was to love him." The family moved to Los Angeles, where Bertha Spector worked as a seamstress, while her son met his destiny. Phil and his friends formed a band called the Teddy Bears in high school and landed a record deal. 19-year-old Phil struck gold on the group's second release, To Know Him Is to Love Him, inspired by his dad's gravestone. It went to number 1 and sold over 1 million copies. But the group disbanded only a year later. Music changed Phil's life, but he also changed music. He isn't just considered one of the most successful producers of the 1960s and 70s, he's regarded as one of the most influential artists of all time. His crown jewel is his wall of sound production technique. His collaborators included the Beatles, the Ramones, Leonard Cohen, the Ronettes, and Ike and Tina Turner. They created magic together, but Phil started testing their patience. Even as a quirky genius, there was only so much he could get away with. As years passed, he became more unreliable, difficult, erratic, and sometimes even psychotic. Phil was almost always armed, and not afraid to show it. There was the time he held the Ramones captive, and that time he shot the ceiling when John Lennon was in the studio, or the time he pulled his gun out and chased Lennon through the halls. There are countless stories of him terrorizing everyone from nobodies to A-listers, and he behaved even worse in his personal life. In 1963, Phil married Annette Mirar. She was the 20-year-old lead singer of the pop trio The Spectors. Phil was the group's 24-year-old creator and producer. He even named a record company, Annette Records, after her. But this didn't stop him from betraying her that same year. It turns out Phil had a type, younger and under his control. Ronnie Bennett was the 20-year-old lead singer of the girl group The Ronettes. In 1963, they signed to one of Phil's labels, making him their producer and manager, which should have made any relationship off limits. Instead, Phil began an affair with her, but she didn't even know he was married. In 1966, his marriage ended, and Phil and Ronnie married in 1968. Phil couldn't even give his new bride one happy day. After one too many drinks, he accused her of being a gold digger. His estate became Ronnie's gilded cage. He installed barbed wires, guard dogs, and security guards. Not to keep intruders out, it was to keep Ronnie in. He even confiscated her shoes to make sure. Over the course of their years-long marriage, he rarely let her go out, but when he did allow it, he made insane demands. He made her drive with a life-size inflatable of him in the passenger seat. He also installed a gold coffin in the basement, then told her what he'd do if she didn't come back. Ronnie began drinking and attending AA meetings just to get out of the house. Then she and her mother Beatrice hatched an escape plan where they would sneak out of the service entrance. But on the day they ran right into Phil. Beatrice convinced him they were only walking through the mansion's grounds. Then they ran for their lives. But Ronnie wasn't free until she settled the divorce and custody battles. Phil fought dirty. He often whipped out a gun and talked about hiring hitmen. He demanded that she give up everything from her music rights to the kids. After they divorced in 1974, she settled for a measly $25,000, a used car, and a monthly alimony of $25,000 for 5 years. Phil didn't just get a divorce in 1974, he also got into a horrific car accident. The impact threw him through the windshield. His body looked so lifeless that most responders would have declared him dead at the scene, but one officer noticed the faintest of pulses. They rushed him to the hospital and into surgery. If he wasn't unhinged enough already, this traumatic accident had bizarre consequences. Phil's head injuries were serious, requiring many hours of surgery, 300 stitches on his face and over 400 stitches on the back of his head. The crash scarred him physically and mentally. After the accident, Phil began wearing ridiculous wigs. Then he began withdrawing. His days as a music powerhouse and functioning adult were well behind him. As the 1970s went on, he became more reclusive. By the 80s, his life transformed into one of isolation, drugs, and more alarming behaviour. Despite that, he and his then girlfriend Janice Zavala had biological twins, but little did they know, tragedy was coming. In 1992, 9-year-old Philip Jr. succumbed to leukemia. On top of all the other substances, Phil now began taking copious amounts of antidepressants. His behaviour already freaked people out. He was already a menace, but everything was about to get worse. Phil's erratic and oftentimes dangerous behaviour drove people away, yet at the same time, he couldn't handle being alone in his mansion. So he hatched a plan, particularly for when visitors came over and had the audacity to want to go home. Former guests revealed how Phil locked his doors and gates to prevent them from leaving. It was even worse for women who rejected him. On multiple occasions, he pulled out a gun to prevent women from leaving. Then, on February 3rd, 2003, he pulled the trigger for real. Intoxicated and medicated, he went to the House of Blues, a restaurant and music venue. That's when he crossed paths with Lana Clarkson. The struggling actress and waitress didn't recognise him, until another waitress let her know that Phil was an important man and a big tipper. Phil propositioned Lana. Realising that his power and connections could open doors for her, she agreed to go home with him, but only for one drink. Phil promised that his driver Adriano De Souza would wait outside the whole time and would take her home after the drink. But Lana never made it home. Adriano drove them 35 minutes to Phil's mansion and waited outside. At 5 a.m, he heard shots coming from inside the house. Then Phil came outside, waving his gun around. After he finally admitted that he had shot Lana, Adriano called emergency services. The authorities raced to the property and made not one, but many disturbing discoveries. The mansion, now taken over by mice and rats, had seen better days. Some rooms hadn't been occupied in years. And then they found Lana's body, slumped over in a chair with a bullet in her mouth. Phil already changed his story. He said she'd done this to herself. But the police didn't buy it and launched an investigation. It was only a matter of time before they found out the truth. In the meantime, Phil was still going after much younger women. A few weeks later, Rochelle Short caught his eye at a restaurant. She was 41 years his junior and the spitting image of Lana. Rochelle admitted she'd always had a thing for older men. She didn't learn about Lana until weeks later, but it didn't faze her. Rochelle was impressionable, and Phil knew it. In 2005, with Phil on bail while awaiting his trial, he and Rochelle got engaged and married a month later. For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factinate member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. The trial began in March 2007 and was televised. Phil took full advantage of the attention. He wore flamboyant suits, high-heeled shoes, and wigs. Phil was figuratively and literally sick. In a pre-trial deposition, he testified that he'd been treated for bipolar disorder for almost a decade. Phil's defense team claimed that Lana was depressed over a breakup and her financial situation. That night, she was drunk and on drugs. They claimed Lana took her own life. Lucky for Phil, the prosecution had their work cut out for them. It turns out, this wasn't the slam dunk case they thought it would be. Knowing Phil was guilty was one thing, but proving it was another. Most of the forensic evidence was inconclusive. There were no witnesses inside the mansion. The prosecution only had the testimonies of his driver and 5 women who testified that Phil showed them his guns after they rejected him. The jury needed to reach a unanimous decision, but they couldn't. 10 members decided he was guilty, while 2 considered him not guilty. The judge declared a mistrial. Phil would have to do this all over again. His second trial started in October 2008, and in March 2009, after 19 days of deliberating, the jury made their decision. This time, it was unanimous. Phil Spector was guilty of murdering Lana Clarkson. He was sentenced to 19 years to life. He was already 70 years old, so this was effectively a life sentence. But Phil refused to go down without a fight. His defense team appealed 3 times, citing his poor health. All were rejected. Rochelle didn't give up though. She even got a license to practice as a private investigator in hopes of building a better case for him. Phil went from riches to rags. He spent 23 hours a day in a tiny shared cell. He couldn't do much but read. He was estranged from all of his kids except for his daughter who lived on the other side of the country. This made Rochelle the centre of his world. She was in control of his life, legacy, and fortune. They talked on the phone every weekday, and every Saturday she would make the 3-hour journey to visit. They'd get 1 hug and 1 kiss, then they would talk in the visitors area for hours. But their weirdly wedded bliss didn't last forever. In 2018, Phil divorced Rochelle and made shocking allegations against her. He claimed that she only gave him $300 a month while she blew through his $35 million fortune. After 12 years, most of it locked up, his third and final marriage was over. Over the years, his health declined even more. On January 16, 2021, Phil died due to complications from COVID. He was 81 years old and would have been eligible for parole in 3 years. The media rushed to report on his death, but many botched their coverage. Readers complained of outlets focusing too much on Phil's accomplishments and not enough on his wrongdoings. Then Ronnie jumped into the conversation. On social media, she wrote, "It's a sad day for music and a sad day for me. He was a brilliant producer, but a lousy husband." And the darkest part of their horrifying relationship was when Phil came up with a devious plan to control Ronnie. In 1968, the newlyweds adopted their son, Dante Philip Spector, but Phil didn't do this out of the goodness of his heart. In his mind, a child would bind Ronnie to him even more. But one child might not be enough to stop her from leaving, so Phil took it up a notch and plotted behind her back. In 1971, she came home to 5-year-old twins running around her home. Phil adopted Louis Philip Spector and Gary Philip Spector and presented them as surprise Christmas gifts. But Ronnie knew better. Phil was using them as 2 more anchors to keep her trapped. Phil was an evil husband and an evil dad. Even more disturbingly, Gary alleged that his adoptive father blindfolded and made inappropriate acts towards him, claiming it was meant to prepare him for future relationships. Dante also admitted the family was very sick, twisted, dysfunctional, and that he ran away from home at age 10 to escape. If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. If you want a say in who we cover next, join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.